presentation, for a first presentation aimed at students. So a few housekeeping things. Please remain muted. There's going to be question time at the end. So if you have any questions as we go along, please do just pop them in the chat box. You just seen, I think, we're recording this session. So just so you know that you're agreeing to being recorded just by staying here. I'm Lucila Marquez. I'm Senior Manager for Cambridge Assessment International Education here in Latin America, together with my colleagues Fabricio Rossi, Nick Blanchard, and Richard Gilby. We take forward the whole of the Cambridge international work here in Latin America. If everybody could mute the microphones, it would be great, because there's going to be a lot of background noise. If you see that you're not having such a good experience listening or hearing, turn your camera off for a little bit. That's going to help. So today we're delighted to have Claire Harvey with us today. She's going to deliver a presentation aimed at students. All of you are 14 years old or above. And we're going through very special times, unprecedented times. None of us had ever lived through anything like this. And I think that for different ages, the impact is different. And Claire is going to help us think about unlocking your superpowers. I will let Claire introduce herself.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be at this session. And hopefully what I'm going to give you today is an opportunity to think and to really kind of work through some things, but recognizing that this is not the end of the journey. So recognizing that what I'm going to give you is some tools to start thinking about how do you get to where you want to be, and carrying on that journey, you will be able to have access to the slides to make sure you're working through those things. I'm very relaxed, so feel free to put yourself on camera, off camera, whatever works for you. Put comments in the chat box. I'll be running a few polls. If you're in a big group, you may want to kind of talk amongst yourselves for a second before submitting your answer. If you don't want to go into the polls, you just want to think, that's equally absolutely fine. And if you want to kind of ask some questions afterwards, there will absolutely be time for that as well. You will find closed captions available if that's easier for you, if my accent is a little hard to understand, and the session will be recorded. So let's start off by thinking about, what do we mean unlocking your superpowers? How do you work out where you want to be in the future, and how do you work out what really works for you in terms of knowing what that looks like? The first thing to say is, very few things happen by accident. And we need to ask ourselves, are we wanting to have what we call a future evolution, where things just happen and we look back in 10, 15 years time and think, how did I get here? How did this happen? Or do you want your future to be a revolution? Do you want to shape your future? Do you want to make sure that you're driving your future? There's no right or wrong answer. It's absolutely up to you in terms of what works best for you. But recognize that times are changing, and times are changing really quickly. So we need to be quite smart in what we're thinking. We need to make sure that we're taking the things that happened previously and we're learning from them to really shape our future, what works for us and who we are and what we want to be going forward. We need to make sure, particularly at the moment, in really difficult times, that we are really maximising the opportunities that come today, and we're being present in today. And we need to make sure that we're making some plans for the future, but I'm going to talk about how we do that in an ever-changing world. So the bad news is you're not possibly ready for the future. And there is no absolute way you can be, so that's absolutely okay. You can think about all the things that you might like to do based on the information you have now, but always hold a line to what might be coming that you never imagined. If we'd have been saying 2-3 years ago that in 2020 and 2021 you were going to be in self-isolation, you were going to be working remotely, you were going to be having different experiences for your exams, you would have never anticipated that, and you would have never believed it. So we need to be really open to what might happen in the future that perhaps we haven't thought about. Here are some facts on the screen to ensure you that you can't be future ready at the moment. All you can be is as ready as you can be. We're moving from a linear career path that people who are old like me and perhaps your parents have told you about, where you thought at your age what you want to be, and you go to university based on that experience, or you become an apprentice and you follow a linear career path. You start at the bottom of an organization and you stay in that organization and you move up through the ranks of that organization. Those days are dramatically waning and leaving us fast. Nowadays, we accept what we call a jungle gym career, where you're going to go sideways, you're going to go backwards, you're going to jump sectors, you're going to jump different jobs. As you can see on the screen, your generation are going to have an average of 40 jobs in your career, whereas perhaps your parents' generation had an average of 7 or 8. So we can let go of that concept of, I must know exactly what I've got to be, and I've got to plan my path right now, and leave ourselves open. We also know that many of the jobs that exist now won't exist by the time you hit the workplace, and many of the jobs that will exist in that place haven't even been created yet. So you can't possibly be planning now to have the right skills for those jobs that we haven't created yet. We're increasingly finding that graduates who are coming out of university are having to go through a lot of reskilling to be ready for the workforce. And actually what we're finding is that employers are much more keen to get people with less qualifications and more strong agility and interpersonal skills. So you can think about your career and what you're planning and thinking about, whilst I'm gathering all the qualifications, because they're always important, am I also gathering the interpersonal skills and the experiences and the transferable skills that will help me be really future ready? So we can think about, rather than that linear career path, think about all the different routes that we can get to in order to get to where we'd like to be, even if we don't know where we'd like to be yet. Recognizing that whatever step we take immediately now doesn't set your career in one direction or another. It opens up a whole lot of opportunities, a bit like a tube map. There are 15 or 16 different ways to get to where you want to be. So we can let go of that, I have to make the right decision now, and we can start to see the many different opportunities that will ultimately take us where we want to be in the future. Whilst I'm saying that, I'm also saying, make sure you have a plan, but make sure that plan is built in 18-month chunks. So you're thinking about whatever is coming up for you in the next 18 months, and you're making some decisions around there, but then you're waiting to see what happens then before making the next 18 months plan. Now, of course, school and university and further studies takes longer than 18 months, so you'll have an idea, but make sure in terms of your actions and your dreams, you're giving yourself a long-term goal, but you're not setting yourself so in a rigid path that you're missing great opportunities that come that just aren't present at the moment. So what can we do in these circumstances? We can start to think about self-agility. How do we take skills that are absolutely key to being able to take them and learn them and then unlearn them and relearn them in different scenarios? How can you in your toolkit build a set of collection of skills and experiences that are really valuable in their present way, but equally are really transferable into different scenarios and different settings and different experiences. So by the time you're applying for jobs or you're thinking about your career, you can see how those experiences, while not perfect for that experience, can actually be really valuable. I can see somebody saying in the chat that people can't join because the meeting has met its maximum number of participants. I'm really sorry about that. There's not much we can do about that, but it will be recorded, so they will be able to see it later. So we can think about agility in a number of ways. We can think about our own agility. What am I? What are my skills? What matters to me? And how's that evolving over time rather than being very static? We can think about mental agility. How do I take my thinking and my knowing now and put it into different contexts? We can think about people agility. How do I take my skills to interact with people and expand those so that I can interact with the broadest set of people, people who are very different from me, people who live in very different places, people who have very different views, people who work very differently to me. We can think about our change agility, really important at the moment. How do we really embrace change? How do we really thrive in uncertainty rather than survive it, which many of us are doing? And we're going to unpick that a little bit in a minute. And we can think about results agility. What does success look like? What does success look like to me now? What would success look like to me in the future? So let's start by breaking down what we do know so that we can start to think about how do we build some of that agility going forward. So this is from the World Economic Forum, and it sets out the skills that are going to be increasingly important. They do this, they used to do this every 10 years. They now do this about every 18 months, recognizing the speed of change. But they give us a sense of what are the skills that are really going to be important going forward. And you can see the top 10 here, but you can also see they're built into 4 big themes, and these themes are remaining relatively static. Problem-solving skills, the ability to solve increasingly complex problems where there's very rarely a clear right or wrong answer. Our ability to manage ourselves and our emotions and our resilience, and like I said, we're going to unpick some of that at the moment. Our ability to work with people, and when we're getting to a digital transformation society where more and more of the manual tasks are going to be done by robots and technology, the role of the human becomes about building trust and interacting with humans and building influence. And the use of technology, not being replaced by robots, but working with robots and interacting with technology with that kind of real sense of getting the best out of both humans and technology. So thinking about those 4 boxes, I'm going to give you a quick poll, which is which ones of these do you feel you need to spend more time on? Hopefully you can see the poll in front of you, and you can vote by clicking on the box. Is it problem solving and solving increasingly complex problems? Is it self-management and dealing with change and dealing with ambiguity? Is it working with people? Is it technology? Is it all of them? Is it none of them? Or are you not sure? No right or wrong answer, just a sense of gauging where people are. Give you just a few more seconds to vote. If people want to share their views, feel free to put it in the chat box. And I'm going to give you some time to chat with each other in a second as well. Okay, we're nearly there. Just a few more seconds to get voting. Like I said, if you don't want to vote, it's absolutely fine. Just think for yourself. Okay, I'm going to close the voting now. There we go. You can see the results, hopefully. So majority of people are looking at self-management, but a real mix. Doesn't matter what the answer is, but whatever you're thinking, whatever that resonates for you, think about what could I start to do to build those skills, because they're the big 4 blocks of skills that are going to become increasingly important and therefore increasingly valuable in terms of your superpowers in the future. So let's now think about how do we do that? We've got that sense of a vague, changing, uncertain future. We've got that sense of those 4 blocks of skills, but how do I put them together? How do I know where it is I want to go? How do I know, even on that kind of jungle gym approach to my career, how do I know where to even start? Well, I think we can learn a lot from Oprah on many things, but she talks about the importance of purpose. Not building a CV with a set of experiences, but building a CV that builds a sense of who you are, what matters to you, what is valuable to you, and what are your values. Because then when we get given a lot of choice, or things change exactly as it has in the last 2 years, and we're forced to make different decisions, our sense of purpose can really help us navigate. It can be a bit like a beacon in an uncertain and dark world. So let's unpick that a little bit. Let's think about where we thrive, and I'm going to put you into breakout rooms to have this conversation. It can be very complex to think about what's this career, or what's that career, or what's this school, or what's that school. Partly because when you read websites, every place looks like the best place in the world, but also because we have to have a sense of how to compare very different things. So I would encourage you to think less about what job I want to do, and more about what environment do I thrive in, and what things get me most excited. So, for example, you can start to think about, do I love being in a really busy environment where I'm doing lots of things? Or do I like to be in quite a structured environment? Do I like to work predominantly on my own? Or do I like to work with loads of people? Do I like to be end-to-end, start to finish? Or do I like to have ideas but never really get through to the development phase? Starting to build your environment that you can then put onto a lens of different careers, different jobs, different opportunities, even different volunteering opportunities. It doesn't have to be about your career. And we can take some of that thinking into the Japanese concept Ikigai, thinking about your reason for being, the meaning and the purpose that you have. Now think about these things that we often talk about. What do you love doing that perhaps you might not be very good at? What are you good at, but perhaps you don't love it, or perhaps you couldn't get paid for it? What can you realistically earn a living from, and what does the world need? If you find that spot in the middle, which is different for all of us, then that's when you really, really thrive. Sometimes we might find that we're good at something and it could lead to a really well-paid job, but actually it doesn't add a lot of meaning, it doesn't align to our values, and we don't love it, in which case it will just feel like a job. We could find something that we love and that the world really needs, but we're not very good at it, in which case it's going to be more of a mission, but we're not going to have an impact on it. We could find something that we love and we're good at, but we can't get paid for, in which case we're going to really struggle to thrive in society. So we need to try and find that spot in the middle. I'm going to give you a quick poll before I put you in breakouts. This is a 2-part question. Which ones of these do you really influence your thinking at the moment, and which ones of these influence your thinking less? So the 4 elements: what do you love? What are you good at? What can you get paid well for, and what the world needs? Which of those things influence you most? And then if you scroll down a bit further, you'll see the next part of the question, which is which ones do you least think about when you're thinking about your future? Again, if you're in a group, you can have a quick conversation, but I will give you time to go into breakout rooms and talk about this. And if you're in a group, you may not want to join the breakout room. You may want to have a conversation with yourselves instead. Okay, I can see you're voting well. Excellent. Give you just a couple more seconds. Okay, just 2 more seconds and I'm going to end the poll. Okay, and I will share the results with you. So we can see that for the majority of people who joined in the poll, they're currently most thinking about what they love, but a mixture of those things. And some people are thinking about all of them together, which is great. And in terms of the thing that you're least thinking about what you can get paid for. Interesting. That's often the most common one, actually. And some of you are not sure and you need to think about that. So it's great wherever you are, but just try and use this going forward to think about all of those elements together. Now, there, of course, are some times in our lives where we have to make decisions. I, for example, once took a job where I was good at something and it paid me well. I didn't enjoy it, but that was a very conscious decision because of the circumstances I found myself in. So we can't always find that perfect space, but we can be cognizant of our decisions and how we're getting as close to that as we can. We can also start to think about our drivers. What are the things that keep us going, particularly when things get tough? Because we can have a perfect dream, but we've got to keep working at it, and we've got to keep working at it all of the time, when it's going well, but also when it's going bad. So we can think about our drivers in three key areas: our passions, our motivations, and where our pursuit of excellence is. They're not always the same. Our passion and our motivation might be quite different, and our passion and our excellence might also be quite different. So I want you to think a little bit about this, and I'm going to put you into your breakout rooms now. I want you to think about how do you get to that point? What does that look like for you now? When you're thinking about circumstances, what are you thinking about? And how much are you ruled by your passion, or how much are you seeing your passion as just a side and not really thinking about it in terms of your future? Because when we're doing what we thrive in, and when we're doing what we're passionate about, and when we're doing something that has purpose to us, that's when we really, really do well. Okay, I've opened up the rooms now. I'm hoping that people are able to join. If you're not used to Zoom, you should just click on the join room, and I will call you back in 5 minutes. Okay, hopefully everyone is back now, and you've had some good conversations, and you're starting to think about how do you start to find that the grounding from which you can make other decisions. And hopefully you met some people that perhaps you haven't met before, which is also really valuable. So we can't just think about the what we're going to do. We also need to think about the bigger picture, the how we do things as well, because far too much in society, we will see people who get a result, but they leave a trail of devastation behind them. So in order to be really successful, we need to think about our broadest impact, which is bringing who you are, your authentic way of doing things, your natural style, your strengths and weaknesses, thinking about what you do, but also thinking about how you do it as well. What do you leave people thinking and feeling? What impact do you have? And those things together are your biggest impact. So don't just think about the what, think about your natural style and your ways of doing things as well. Are you a big picture thinker versus a detail thinker? Are you a quick thinker versus a reflective thinker? You know, put yourself in lots of different situations to try as many things as possible, because that's the process by which you'll start to learn your best way of doing things. We also need to think about what your natural strengths are. We do a strange thing as humans. We tend to fall into two camps. We either find our strengths quite early and we stick to that So, for example, if you're great at music or great at sport, do you find yourself in a situation where you only ever do that thing? You know, you only ever play that sport. You don't try any other sports. You never try music, for example, or vice versa. It's very easy and comfortable when we find the things we're good at to stick there. But it's really bad for our brain, and it's really bad for our future, because it means we're not getting the breadth of experiences that we need. So we need to find out how we focus on our strengths, and we can do this by looking at flow. We can do this by thinking about how much time do I spend challenging myself and coming out of my comfort zone where I know what I'm doing, I can do it well, it's already coming quite easily for me. And how much time do I spend putting myself in situations that challenge me? But then when I do that, do I have the right skills in order to take on that challenge? Because if we take ourselves into a challenge zone where we have low skills, a great example at the moment is, you know, many people who found themselves in an area of remote working and having to use technology a lot, but perhaps didn't have the experience of that technology. That causes great anxiety because we've got high challenge, low skill. Or do we put ourselves in situations where we've got high challenge, but we know we've got the base skills to cover that? It doesn't mean we're ready. It means that we've got the base set of skills that we can build and adapt and work on. And when we're in that space, when we feel like we're growing and we feel like we're really challenging ourselves, but we're not terrified, that's what we call flow. Think of a time you've been in flow, whether it's in an activity, whether it's in a social situation, whether it's in school, whatever it is for you. Think of a time when you feel like you're growing, you feel like you're stretching yourself, but you feel safe and enthusiastic and challenged and excited and a real sense of achievement through that process. And think of that feeling versus the time when you've been asked to do things that you felt completely overwhelmed by, or when you're doing something, but actually you're not having to put much effort into it. You might be great at it, but you're not really learning anything. And you can start to see the real difference. So you can think about the things that you're doing, whether it's in school, whether it's in your social activities, whether it's in the volunteering that you're choosing to do, whether it's in any part of your life, and think about, how do I get to that point where I'm in the challenge, I'm challenging myself, I'm not in my comfort zone, but I've also know I've got the base skills to cover that. And again, the more situations we try, the more things we do, the higher the likelihood that we're going to have that toolbox of skills that we need. And the more times we spend in flow, the more times we thrive and the more times we're building our strengths. But of course, it isn't always about strengths. We also have to recognize our weaknesses. None of us are perfect. But we can do what's called separating out our weaknesses so that we're not becoming so focused on our weaknesses that we let them hold us back, or that we're just ignoring them and pretending they're not there and therefore not growing. When we talk about separating our weaknesses, we talk about a couple of things. We talk about thinking about the things that might be impacting us right now and holding us back from what we want to do, and we should address those ones right now. We think about the things that when we're looking in our 18-month plan and we're thinking, I might need to do those, you know, we're coming out of, we're in a difficult time in COVID at the moment. We're starting to move through that, depending on where you are, that will be a different part of your journey. We're starting to think more about technology. That will have shown you the things that perhaps in the future you recognize you might need to develop. And we should have a plan for developing those. And then there are other things that perhaps we can't control, whether it's an accent, whether it's a something that we just don't enjoy, whether it's something that we feel like we should be good at, but we just aren't, but it doesn't impact our bigger plan. We should let go of those things, because time spent on those are time spent not on the things that matter. So if you want to have a career in science, for example, it's less important about those other things. Of course, you've got to get through exams, which is why those 18 months are very important. You can't always look too far, but give the proportionate amount of time to how important those weaknesses are to you in the scheme of things. Otherwise, you'll spend a lot of time and energy worrying about things right now that either you can't control at all. You can't control what's happening in terms of COVID. You can't control what's happening and the speed of which you're going to return to school or what that looks like. So needing to let go of those things becomes very, very important, and just think about, what can I control and how am I going to control those? We can, as we're doing this and as we're looking backwards, we can develop what we call our reflected best self, that footprint where you know that you do your best. Now, how do we do that? We get as much feedback as possible. We make sure we ask everybody in every situation, how did I show up in that? What did you think I did well? What did you think I could do better? What do you think, what do you think my skills are? What do you think my development areas are? It feels really weird when we do it at first, but it's really important because other people see things that we don't see. And the more feedback we get, the better we can shape that view and move away from our blind spots of what we see to understand the environment and how we show up in terms of that broader impact, the impact we have on other people as well as ourselves and the outcome. So get used to, and it feels strange at first, but get used to, and if you're in an environment with other people listening to this, make an agreement with each other that you'll give each other informal feedback at the time, but also you're going to be open to receive that feedback. Sometimes when people give us feedback, we say, no, that's not me, I didn't do that, and we get very defensive. And what that means is we're not opening ourselves to what other people see to be true that perhaps we don't want to hear. So give that feedback freely and receive that feedback. Doesn't mean you need to do everything that people give you. You can decide what to do with that feedback. You can decide if it's a pattern and you can start to work on those areas, or perhaps even recognize that wasn't a great day for me, and so I'm going to leave that feedback to one side. As you get that feedback and you see patterns, you can start to almost develop your self-portrait, your best self. I am at my best when. And develop that structure, because then you can use that to think about, where are the environments I thrive, which situations should I put myself in, where am I going to really, really enjoy myself and therefore be best. You can do that by looking backwards as well as looking in the present. So you can, if you have time and you want to do this after the session, you can start to think about a timeline looking back. Look back at your experiences so far. Where were your influences that meant in terms of things that you thought about for your future? Where were your personal influences? And what's the pattern and learning from that? We can be so busy looking forward that we forget to look back, and actually past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So start to make a mini timeline. I always recommend to people do it every couple of months and just see what the patterns are and see what it's telling you. Now, we've talked a lot about skill set, but actually the reality is that us at our best is only 20% skill set and 80% mindset. So we can start to think about, how do we get our brains in the right place to really challenge ourselves and be at our best? I'm going to talk a little bit about resilience, because as Lucia said, at the moment, these are tough times. There's huge amounts of uncertainty in the future of work. And on top of that are huge amounts of uncertainty in our day-to-day living as well. So how do we build our resilience? Resilience does not mean you're a superhero and nothing affects you. Resilience, if you're a geeky psychologist like me, means the ability to flounder intelligently. The ability to know what to do when you don't know what to do. It's called epistemic character in the psychological term. But it's not something we're born with. It's not something people have or they don't have. How often do you hear people say, oh, that person's very resilient, that person's not very resilient? It's like a muscle. The more we build it, the more we use it, the stronger it gets. So we need to build that toolkit of resilience really well. And we can do it every single day, because when we need it at times like this is when it will become most valuable. We can break it down into 3 key areas. We can break it down into our everyday habits, our attitudes, and our responses. Our everyday habits include things like learning from experience. Everything you do, unpick it. What went well? What didn't go well? What worked, so I should keep doing that? What didn't work, so I should think about a different way of doing that? We tend to fall into traps of saying something was either brilliant or awful. In reality, nothing is really good or really bad. There's bits of both in everything that we do. So get used to unpicking things and just creating a mental log for yourself about, what am I replicating? What am I changing? Often we only do that when things go wrong, which means we miss the opportunity of replicating the things that go right. Give yourself permission to do the things that give you energy. We have, all of us in lives, things that I call radiators, things that make us feel energetic, feel confident, really kind of boost us. And we have what we call hoovers, the things that take our energy and confidence away and can derail us. Work out what they are for you and make sure that when you feel you're floundering, when you feel uncertain, when your resilience is low, you give yourself permission to do the things that give you energy. Normally, they're the first things to go. If you're studying and you're up against the deadline or exams are coming, you say, I can't go out, I can't go with my friends, I can't play that sport or music that I love because I've got to focus on this. The chances are they're the things that will boost your energy, and you need to do them in the same way that you would any other time. Otherwise, you're setting yourself an impossible task. Well, the other key habit is building relationships with people so you can get help. You can really trust people and you can really feel like you're not doing things on your own. And again, the more you do that when you're not feeling low, the easier it is to do it when you are feeling low. We can focus on the lens that we put through things. We can see this as a really difficult time, or we can see it as a challenging time, but with great opportunities. We can work out what we know about ourselves and how we respond to things, work out those patterns in ourselves so we start to see when our resilience is getting low and we put some things in place before it gets too low. We can focus on controlling the controllables. There are things that are absolutely out of our control in terms of societal decisions, so we can let those go and we can focus on our response to those things rather than trying to control and anticipate those things. And we can ask for help. The simplest thing, the hardest thing to do. But again, if you get used to asking for help when you don't need it, you'll find it much easier to ask for help when you do need it. So thinking about those, I want you to think about, and after the session, have some reflection time, either as a group or on your own, about which ones of those do you do well? Which ones of those do you think you could develop? And as a group, which ones of those could you build into your rhythms and ways of working, particularly at the moment when we're in isolation and we're remote and we're not as connected with each other? Our resilience can really suffer, and what we call affinity, a sense of connection, is really, really important. So think about how you could build these into your rhythms as a group, even if you're remote. We can also unlearn those habits of unhealthy thinking that we have. Often when things are going wrong or things are difficult and challenging, we get into a cycle of unhealthy thinking that you can see on the screen. Something goes wrong, this presentation didn't go so well, quickly becomes, I'm not good at presentations, which of course means next time I go to do a presentation, it's not going to go so well because I'm so worried about it, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we can use those resilience tips to break this cycle of unhealthy thinking. That instant feeling of that exam, that piece of work, that activity didn't go so well becomes, what went well about it? What could I change to make it better next time? What can I learn from this situation? Which means next time you go into it, you're going in with a sense of, I've got that understanding from last time, which was a practice and a learning experience. This time is going to be better. And of course, when we go into something thinking it's going to be better, 9 times out of 10, it is better. So think about how you could use that when you start to feel that unhealthy thinking within your own situation. And most importantly, we can be our own cheerleader. We all have a voice going on inside of our head. I would always recommend you name that voice so you can talk about what it's saying to you. And sometimes that voice that should be our best supporter can be our worst critic. So make sure you're controlling that voice And you're also really giving a voice of positive things to the people around you when they need it to. So when you're telling yourself negative things about yourself, or the things that you're doing and the things that you're capable of or not capable of, the only person you're impacting is yourself. So try and control that. Name that voice, hear that voice, and then reframe what it's saying. So I could be saying, oh, Claire, you're really rubbish at timekeeping. And I'm going to say, that voice inside my head is telling me that, but I'm going to reframe that to, I could have learned better at this, and here are the things I'm going to do to be better at it. You can stop looking at focusing on the negatives. How often do you perhaps get a test result back or get your school report and you read through all the nice things really quickly, but you focus on the 2 or 3 areas of people that have suggested for development? Make sure you're taking in as much as the positive as you do the negative. That's hard for us as humans. We hold on to emotional feelings about 8 times longer than positive feelings, unless we challenge ourselves to do so. So make sure you're challenging yourself to see the positives as well as the negatives. Often we're as frightened of failing as we are succeeding. Some of the biggest self-limiting beliefs are our fear of putting ourselves out there and failing. So rather than setting yourself a success, focus on the effort and rather than the outcome. I'm going to try my best. I'm a Paralympian, and I used to say to my team, success is we've left nothing behind. Success is we've done everything we could, irrespective of the outcome. As you're going through exams and things like that, think about how you could reframe what success looks like for you. And lastly, coming back to your career, think about what we say right at the very start. This is your career. This is your choices. The choices are wide and open. So please you and what works for you, rather than what you think other people think you should do. Be yourself, because everybody else is taken, but be yourself in your way. So I wanted to leave you with some top tips. I won't read through them because I want to leave some time for questions, but these you'll be able to revisit them and talk about them going forward if you want to. But that last one of make a plan based on your definition of success, but be willing for that plan to flex as things change and control the controllables, I think will really help you move forward. This, I think, is a great quick quote from Steve Jobs. It's your life. Imagine this is your last day. Think about what you do with that. And if you did that every day, I wonder where you'd end up. But don't just think about the outcomes, think about how you've impacted others. Often we talk about leadership, and you're the type of people that are going to go into great leadership positions. But leadership is actually less of a position and more of a responsibility to leave something better than you left it and to leave a lasting positive impression on people. And you can do that right now. No matter how challenging the circumstances are, no matter how you feel like you can't do things, you have the ability to influence people every single day. So let's make a choice and influence them in a positive way. I will leave you with one last question to ponder on. Given how uncertain the future is, given how sometimes as humans we want to stay in our comfort zone and we want to do the things that we're guaranteed to succeed in, that means we're limiting our superpowers. I know that very personally. I started playing volleyball when I was 36 years old, and 2 years later became the Paralympic captain. If I'd never had a go that day, if I'd just stuck to the things that I thought I was good at, I would never have had that opportunity. What would you do if you were absolutely guaranteed to succeed? And what little steps could you start making to get there? Because the chances are that little voice in your head, that little feeling inside of you that is, I'd love to do this, before the but comes in the way, is the place you're really going to thrive. So don't listen to those buts and start to work with the reality of how you could get there. Thank you very much for listening. I've left 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions or comments or experience that you want to share, please do. feel free to just come off mute if you have any questions or anything that's making you think.